don't think you can monitor audience.
No, not a good.
Oh, you can?
It's not a good.
Oh, maybe that's a 64.
But I don't think you could do that. Be full screen day. So we talk about that. But I assume his lead defense attorney is there.
I just want to stream. I don't even want to
Sure.
Frankie.
He's a big funder.
Sony 790 and Z90 or
Like tenant, yeah.
or DHS temperature 2 light on top for nighttime. Yeah. Nighttime light.
Yeah. I think that's
This is, I love this one. This thing for nighttime light shows.
So I think for 10 a.m. all I need.
courthouse. Okay. Now we'll figure it out there.
You got enough street light there.
Just because cameras I've gotten better, they're better at control.
And do it, like they do now. Some lights here.
This guy?
Lights are really hot.
No, wrong guy.
Yeah.
Wrong turn. Maybe I said, yeah. What's his face? Yeah, you're the wrong name. Old guy. The big jump. That's true.
And for every MOS thing, I just use natural light for everything. I hate blasting this. I mean, I used to
Like
like.
most of it, if you're outside sometimes it's.
Oh, that's different. Yeah.
Like that.
Like if I'm in a subway. And still Wagner, the exact same thing. Actually, just
I have to take like a.
No, I'm gonna use the copy. So, you're gonna use the same copy for Facebook, right? And then,
I shipped one.
shoot up now and see the blue sky. And then all I would need you to do is add this.
It was only strictly to help them.
All right, so we'll probably be 2 minutes out or so. Angela, Jeremy, Dave and I should come in. Or he was like, I'm over there. Lindsay, we told you have to be. You're the first assistant. Hello, how are you?
All right.
Did you finish going live now? Put it up right now. Going live now. I'll be the start of things on our end. Alright, I'm gonna hop off.
But the ones that didn't confiscate, we like took them from the yeah, but then like they had a fit because it's really really bad person, but I had to putting well in the back. I was like, I don't know what to tell you. For Kevin, I want to go.
So we're just leaving that guilty in court.
I was so nervous. The tired home that I broke it up. But I kept going down. I was like, I'm not going to he was going to organize this whole thing, and I was like, I'll talk to Tracy. Sorry, you're like all bundled up. I didn't know. I'll talk to her. No, I still wasn't enough. I know it's still.
That's the one layer you can't shed.
Until like the 50-degree weather, I would just bring it with me and then I would switch into it if I had to outside. But now it's like, it's just impossible.
Yeah,
It's just
that's it.
There's nothing to do.
Morning, everyone. I want to thank you all for being here today. When President Trump was elected November 5th, I made clear that it was my hope that he would act in ways that were in the best interest of our communities, of our residents, of our neighbors, of our friends. And I said very clearly that, A, he's a duly elected president. No one makes any bones about that. And B, he's entitled to enact a policy agenda that he sees fit for the country. But at the same time, I made it equally clear that as the Attorney General of the state of New Jersey, I would stand up for the rule of law and for the rights of our residents. And when I took this job, I swore an oath to uphold the United States Constitution and the Constitution of this state. And I made a commitment to serve the people of the state of New Jersey, all 9.5 million of them. That's why today I'm announcing that New Jersey is leading a group of 18 states, the District of Columbia, and the city of San Francisco, in filing a suit to block President Trump's executive order eliminating birthright citizenship for many Americans. The executive order renders many children born on American soil without citizenship, creating for the first time a class of American-born children whose health and well-being are threatened by their own government. This is an extreme and unprecedented act, and this executive order is an assault on the rule of law. It attacks a right that is core to our nation's earliest days. It's an assault on the very text of the Constitution, a right that our nation made sure to codify in the 14th Amendment in the aftermath of the Dred Scott decision, one of the worst decisions the Supreme Court has ever issued, and following a civil war. So you got to remember, the birthright citizenship clause in the 14th Amendment followed the only brief period in American history where the descendants of slaves were held, even if they were born on American soil, were held not to be American citizens. We fought a bloody civil war, and shortly thereafter enacted 157 years ago the 14th Amendment, which put what had always been the practice into the United States Constitution and deliberately took it out of the hands of presidents and elected leaders as to who would qualify for citizenship when born on American soil. But this isn't just an attack on the law. It's an attack on the very fabric of this nation, this diverse nation, a nation of immigrants. It's an attack on states like New Jersey, home to Ellis Island, in the shadow of the Statue of Liberty, that are built on the contributions of generations of immigrants. So many Americans who have poured blood, sweat, and tears into serving and defending this nation, including attorneys in this office, our law enforcement officers, military service members, our educators, our firefighters, our neighbors, our friends and families are themselves immigrants or are children of immigrants. This executive order is an attack on all of them, and frankly on all of us. And I can think of nothing better that what epitomizes to uphold the Constitution and the rule of law than to defend the rights enshrined in the Constitution against this unlawful executive order. Now, we all have personal connections to immigrants. I remember very fondly going to Ellis Island as a kid and etching my grandparents' names By the way, it was a misspelling. Plotkin was the original name. And then I stand here in Newark, where my family came, I'm sure never imagining that one day, a few generations later, I would be defending their very right to have that American experience. This is a state where my in-laws came from China. Ironically, we're going to talk about Wong Kim Ark. My father-in-law is from the same part of countryside of China that Wong Kim Ark was from. Opened a business here. For 30 years, operated that business 364 days a year. Raised my wife and her brother, both of whom first-generation American-born citizens, who now is raising my two children just a few miles away from where those same grandparents raised my parents. That's the story of America, and everybody has a connection to that. And so when we talk about immigrant communities, when we talk about who these people are, we need to remember that they are all of us. They're not some people far away who we can demonize. They are all of us. They are who we are as a nation. So I am extraordinarily proud to lead this effort on behalf of an incredible coalition to block this clearly unconstitutional executive order. We're the first case to present our full legal briefing and argument to the court, and we hope for a swift decision confirming what we've known all along, that the 14th Amendment and the subsequent Supreme Court precedents that followed are crystal clear. That, quote, all persons born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. There's no question that a child born in the United States to non-citizen parents are, quote, subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. We know it, again, from Wong Kim Ark, an 1898 Supreme Court case that forcefully rejected the position that the executive order now advances today, one that has been repeatedly accepted by the Supreme Court in the 125 years since, and which no president, Democrat or Republican, has challenged since the Civil War. But we also know this as a matter of common sense from reading the plain language of the Constitution itself. We know that the executive order would wreak havoc and chaos. Hundreds of thousands of children who are born in this country to non-citizen parents each year will suddenly have an uncertain legal status. That's at least 420 children born every single day if this order were to take effect. The state's ability to safeguard their well-being, to provide basic services like health care and special education needs, would be thrown into disarray if these children's legal status is uncertain. I say this as a parent of two young children, and I cannot imagine what parents would go through, not knowing if their child suffering from an illness or is autism isn't going to get the services that as an American-born citizen he or she is entitled to. That's why our broad coalition of states is standing up to the president and defending the rule of law. Presidents in this country have broad powers, but they are not kings. We're in the state of Hamilton. We all know this. They are not kings. They do not have the power to unilaterally rewrite the Constitution. They do not have the power to unilaterally disregard our laws. That's true for Donald Trump. That's true for every president that came before him and every president who will come after him. And as an American and as the Attorney General of the state of New Jersey, I will always stand up for our residents, and I will always stand up to defend our Constitution and the rule of law when it is under attack. That is what I swore an oath to do. And that's exactly what we're doing today. The team here and in New Jersey and in so many other states across this country have worked tirelessly over many months to prepare us for this unfortunate reality, where states are on the front lines of defending our rights and defending our residents. And they will lead this fight for birthright citizenship. I want to personally thank many members of my team, including our Solicitor General, Jeremy Feigenbaum, our Deputy Solicitor General, Shankar Duraswamy, Deputy Attorneys General, Viviana Hanley, Shefali Saxena, Elizabeth Walsh, and our Executive Assistant Attorney General, Angela Kai, among many, many others. I know this feels a bit like the beginning of a long and difficult road, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it, because I know the coming weeks and months will be painful to many people in our communities. But I say this to everyone who might be afraid right now, for themselves, for their children, for their neighbors, their classmates, their friends, their loved ones, or even just strangers who they happen to emphasize with based on a shared American experience. As your Attorney General, I'm never going to back down from a fight when it means we're standing up for the rule of law. I'm never going to back down from a fight to stand up for the rights of our residents that are protected in our nation's foundational documents. State attorneys general fought back during the first Trump administration and were successful 80% of the time in suits against that administration. That was a historically unprecedented rate of success, and it was because the first Trump administration violated the law at a historically unprecedented rate. And it's because of these fights that people in this country are safer from gun violence, that they still have access to reproductive health care, that our kids breathe clean air and drink clean water. These are not abstract concepts. As a case in point, New Jersey has been fighting for dreamers in court for over 6 years. Dreamers who only know this country, who run businesses here, who pay taxes here, who raise, yes, American-born children here. And in 2018, when the federal administration under then President Trump did not defend DACA in court in a challenge from the state of Texas, New Jersey was the sole state to intervene to defend the program. Just this past Friday, 6 years later, we're still litigating that case. The famously conservative Fifth Circuit issued an important partial victory. Didn't agree with us entirely on the merits, but it narrowed an injunction issued on the DACA program to the state of Texas. So what does that mean? It means for the 49 other states, for the millions of people who benefit from the DACA program and their American-born children, and the tens of thousands of current and future DACA program participants in New Jersey, that program still exists. And this fight and so many others are not over. We're not going to let up and be afraid of standing up for the rule of law, no matter how hard it is, no matter how long the road may be. And we started taking action even before President Trump took office last week. You may have seen that last Wednesday I announced that New Jersey was leading a coalition of 14 states to intervene in a lawsuit to defend Dreamers' right to access the Affordable Care Act exchange. I also led a coalition of more than a dozen states to intervene in 2 different lawsuits defending ATF rules that are common sense gun safety rules. Common sense, things like prohibiting the sale of forced reset triggers, which will allow you to turn a semi-automatic weapon like an AR-15, the weapon of choice for many mass shootings, into a fully automatic machine gun. Or closing the gun show loophole, another rule that we're defending, so that people can't go across state lines, walk into a gun show, purchase a firearm without a background check, and come across into New Jersey and wreak havoc. These are the types of things we're talking about, defending. These are not partisan or political fights. These are about defending the rule of law and defending the rights and safety of our residents. And so, just as we vigorously defended DACA, just as we said we're going to fight for common sense gun safety laws in a state, by the way, that's had 2 record years running of the lowest number of shootings we've ever had, we are prepared and we are going to vigorously defend birthright citizenship and our American and New Jersey values, values that have been enshrined in the Constitution for 157 years, values that have been part of our nation's fabric for centuries. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Yes, the President's action is using language subject to the jurisdiction of thereof, which you actually mentioned, meaning that the person who gives birth in, let's say, in the United States must have allegiance to this country, right? Can you explain that a little bit more? And does that mean that this could go and, it could turn into a bill? What avenue would the President have? Because it's obviously an executive order, it's not law. Is there an avenue that can be taken using that language? I don't know if you can explain to me. Can you explain why the action can lawmakers devise a bill to actually change the 14th Amendment?
No. So first of all, the precedent is clear. As I said, children born in America are clearly subject to the jurisdiction of this nation and are clearly entitled to birthright citizenship. That's been upheld in multiple Supreme Court decisions. It's been part of the nation's fabric for centuries. The only exception to that was post-Dred Scott, right before the Civil War, which we, again, fought a civil war for, and then promptly after the Civil War said, we're going to make sure that this never gets confused again. We're going to put it in the Constitution of the United States. The reason why you put something in the Constitution, the reason why we talk about rule of law, this is not an abstract concept. It's so that a president, Congress, the majority cannot simply change a right on a whim. This is a right that was codified in one of the most important amendments ever codified in our nation's nearly 2.5-century history. And the president cannot, with a stroke of a pen, write the 14th Amendment out of existence, period.
Justice Thomas has often questioned the constitutionality of that amendment and wants to revisit it. Do you believe this EO is a vehicle for that to occur?
Well, first of all, he's one of 9. And second of all, I think for so-called textualists, the text of this amendment is quite clear. And we believe our arguments, which again have been upheld repeatedly by the Supreme Court, are enshrined in the Constitution, have been part of the practice since our nation's founding. We believe clearly we'll be successful in court. We wouldn't have brought this case. Again, the prism through which we're looking at every one of these actions is not whether I disagree with it. It's whether it violates the law, whether it hurts our residents. And the answer in this score is clearly that we are right on both.
So what can we expect that would happen? I mean, they're supposed to be effective in 30 days, and then you have all these legal challenges, so it's up in the air whether it's going to take effect or not, the executive order. The other question I want to ask you is, what about the Department of State? Are they going to stop issuing like birth certificates? Well, can you explain a little bit about that?
Well, the Secretary of State is one of the defendants in this case. We're seeking a preliminary injunction. The order, as you note, takes effect 30 days from signing. We're seeking a preliminary injunction. We hope the court will act swiftly to prevent this order, which is clearly unlawful and unconstitutional, from ever taking effect.
How will you address President Trump's directive that local law enforcement must cooperate with ICE?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're looking at every action the president took yesterday. I'm the chief law enforcement officer of the state. I care deeply about public safety. And again, I would put our record up against states that maybe not be joining this lawsuit. You're 6 times more likely to be shot and killed in Mississippi than you are in New Jersey, by the way. So I'll save their lecturing about public safety for another day. But let me be clear about something. We already cooperate with federal law enforcement on a range of issues. If you're a murderer, no one is getting protected. That is a complete lie. So I have to see what the president's order means in practice. But here's one thing I know. Law enforcement wants to be breaking up shootings and going after gang members and stopping auto theft and burglaries. What they don't want to do, I'm sure, is breaking into somebody's home who's committed no crime, ripping their American-born children away from them so that they can send those American kids back to a country they've never been to. That's not what law enforcement signed up to do.
I have 2 questions. I'll start with the simple one. Do you have any idea how many New Jerseyans would be affected if this did go into effect?
We have those numbers. Chairman, do we have any numbers in the brief? We can get you them after.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would it be, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. I just have a second question.
We know that it's, again, I said hundreds a day are born in this nation to non-citizen parents. And so you'd have thousands and thousands of kids over the course of the year that would be thrown into this limbo status. Again, the order doesn't say what they are. It just says what they're not.
And what's the report from the governor's office look like on this? And I'm curious because Murphy already reached out to Trump about congestion pricing we saw yesterday. So I guess what's your reaction to him, reaching out about congestion pricing amid executive orders that, are challenging birthright citizenship?
Yeah, I'm not going to comment on any specific thing, but look, the governor, just as I have said, we will be happy to work with the administration where we agree. But I swore an oath as the Attorney General to protect the residents of the state, to stand up for the Constitution of this state and of this nation, to protect and ensure that the rule of law is adhered to. I have a sworn responsibility to do that. And when the president, I think we got to be clear about how extreme what this order is. I know he did a lot of things yesterday, and things can get lost in the sauce a little bit here. But he signed an executive order that, if allowed to stand, would rewrite the nation's constitution for the first time in our nation's history. And so I would be derelict in my duties if I didn't stand up for the rule of law, if I didn't stand up for the rights enshrined in that Constitution. And I'm not going to hesitate to do that.
We're speaking about executive orders. We have a lot of New Jerseyans who are cattle rioters, who are not defendants.
Yeah.
Can you speak to what may be happening to those people from New Jersey and their prosecutions?
Yeah, look, I said yesterday, that's a deeply, deeply disappointing, disconcerting, devastating order to see people who conspire to and did in fact undermine the democratic process, taking violent acts resulting in a New Jersey resident, New Jersey born bred law enforcement officer losing his life. I don't have any comment about what we do, but the act itself, I think, furthers folks' cynicism and distrust in government, that government somehow exists and doesn't work for us, that it protects a privileged class because of who you are politically. That's not the way the criminal justice system is supposed to function. And I've been very clear. I was clear that I disagreed with some of President Biden's pardons. I was clear that I disagree with the January 6th pardons. The criminal justice system needs to function separate and outside of politics.
If this birthright citizenship EO does go through and is not adjourned, what does it create citizenship-wise for the human beings that are born afterwards? Are they stateless citizens? What's the sea they're swimming in?
I think that's probably a question better directed at whoever drafted this order, but I'm confident this order is never going to take effect because it's so clearly unlawful and unconstitutional, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure that happens.
Does it affect, does the order affect kids born 30 days after it's implemented, or is it not kids in the past, right?
Yes, it's prospective.
Okay.
I think even this administration knows they couldn't yank citizenship away from millions of people who got it through Birthright. But make no mistake, just because these children aren't born yet doesn't make the action any less extreme. If this order were to take effect, it would be an unprecedented act undermining the rule of law by a single president, one of the most unprecedented acts undermining the rule of law by a president in our nation's history.
So there were a lot of executive orders that were signed yesterday. Is there anything else that caught your eye that, might want to hint at suing over next
Did a lot of late night reading last night, as did our team. Look, you got to hand it to the president. He's been pretty transparent. He's been pretty upfront with the American people. What he said he was going to do is largely what he did. Very little in there, I'd say, was surprising. There's a reason why we're filing this case less than 24 hours after he issued the order. We were prepared. And again, my role is not to fight for the sake of it. I don't wake up every day dying to sue the administration. I don't. Our goal is to protect the rule of law and protect the residents of this state. And you can see here, this is an egregious example of an unlawful act. But rest assured, we are looking at everything the president does, just as we would look at anything any administration does to make sure they're not violating the law and not hurting our residents.
If it's an uphill battle, like you mentioned, this has never happened before, it might not happen again, and he's not able to accomplish, the purpose of the executive order. What is he trying to accomplish? What? Is it fear? Is it, telling people not to come here? What is your take on it?
Oh, I've long since tried to get into President Trump. Stop trying to get into President Trump's head. I'll defer to his administration on why he's doing this. I can't understand how someone can look at the issue we're talking about. I told you our personal stories. Everybody has these. And look at the legal history here. Look at the history of why this amendment is in the Constitution, because it was only a decade that this policy of birthright citizenship wasn't universally accepted as the law of the land, and it was the Civil War. And so, again, the public came together and said in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War, one of the first things we're going to do is say that we can never have this debate again. That descendants of slaves and every other child born on American soil is an American citizenship. The debate was settled, and the Supreme Court has repeatedly said the debate is settled. So I can't pretend to know why they're doing this, but we're prepared to make sure that it never sees the light of day.
You-
I guess last question, we see that there's ICE raids kind of looming in Chicago and other cities. Are there any fears about what that could look like in New Jersey, and how would your office respond if there are, ICE raids in major cities?
Yeah, as I said earlier, we're going to monitor and see what happens. Again, we already have a lot of cooperation with the federal government. We have clear rules of the road. We'll see what happens. But we're going to take everything in stride rather than respond to potential hypotheticals. I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank our incredible team who has worked around the clock for many, many weeks now to be prepared for this. And I want to tell the people in New Jersey that we are ready to stand up for them and for the rule of law. Thank you.
That number, or is it just use hundreds?
That was with a national number, right?
Yeah, like New Jersey, is that New Jersey?
Let me check with our folks, I saw them talking.
And this is what you filed on
Massachusetts.